I want to thank everyone for showing up today. My name is Jason Losh, and I've been with Deedle for 14 years now. Today's topic is going to be Deedle 30 years and 60 minutes. So this will be the start of our web series program, and I'm going to leave it to Fritz here to explain how we put this together and where it sort of started from.
All right. Well, welcome everybody. I'm glad you were able to join. And there is obviously we are living in a very strange world right now. And the one thing that I wanted to do is change the subject for at least 60 minutes, if we can, and not talk about the crisis that is on everybody's mind and everybody's dealing with and everybody's suffering from. So I decided to start a webinar series with something that's a little bit more lighthearted, with a couple of anecdotes of the history of our company. And I'm surprised how many people actually signed up for this. Thank you. I wasn't sure if there would be a lot of interest for this, but I guess you want to know what's behind Deedle and how it all came about. So the secrets will be revealed in the next 60 minutes, and I'm gonna have to try to talk fast and keep my answers short, because it's a 30-year-long story. So let me tell you, I can talk for hours about this. And a number of my people have suffered through that. We tried this internally just with our staff in the last week, and we did it in 2 sessions that each ran over an hour. So it was such good response that I decided to expand the audience, let you all into the secrets. And then we will continue this series with some talks that touch on the topics that are important to us. And we will have some guest speakers on the series. We will do this now every Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, because we believe that's a time that will allow West Coast and Europe to dial in if anybody wants to dial in. So again, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today. And Jason will tell you a little bit more about the web series that's coming up.
Yeah. So next week, we're going to do distribution supply chain and what art shipping will look like post-COVID-19. And as Fritz mentioned, we're going to have some guest speakers on there to speak about supply chain solutions. Then the following week, we're going to do supervision 101. It's going to talk about courier assist and basic supervision across all spectrums for museums and galleries. But I think we should jump into this, Fritz, and get started on your history and the history of Dietl International. So can you tell us a little bit about where you're from in Europe and your family?
All right. Well, we're going all the way back to the beginning. I was born and raised in Vienna in Austria. Had wonderful time there, except going to school. I wasn't very much into going to school and attending school, and now I'm suffering with my children through what I went through as a kid. Anyway, I dropped out of school when I was 16 years old, after my English teacher kicked me out of school.
Did you do something specific?
I'm sorry?
Did you do something specific to get kicked out?
Well, I didn't do my homework. I didn't learn the vocabulary. I didn't do very well in my tests. And basically, I failed in English. Let me just put it that way. So I wasn't, I'm not a student who's learning by rote. And, the system back then was pretty much learning by rote. And it just wasn't for me. I couldn't do it. I didn't want to do it. I had other things in my mind, like playing billiards in the coffee house instead of like sitting in school. So I was very good in skipping school, and my mom was a doctor, and I had access to her notepad, so I could write my own sick notices. I knew every type of mild sickness that one can imagine to not go to school, and I would write it and fake my mom's signature. So it's a little story from the background. Anyway, let's skip over that. I dropped out of school. And my dad said, well, if you don't want to go to school, it's fine, but then you have to work. And so I ended up actually my very first job just purely by chance, after getting notices from the employment office to interview at various companies for apprenticeships, because in Europe you have the system where you can be an apprentice. So you have to go to school till you're 16, but after that you can either continue in high school or you can be an apprentice and learn a trade, or you can just work, period. I mean, you don't even have to do that. Anyway, I just happened to go, I was called into an interview at a shipping company called Kunsttrans in Vienna. For some reason, the owner there took a liking to me and ended up hiring me.
I want to go back to this, though, because this is actually an important part of you getting hired there. How did you get to the Kunsttrans interview?
All right. Well, if you really want to know the secret of, why I ended up in art shipping, I got a lot of these notices from the employment office, and I didn't go to any of the interviews. And my father actually intercepted this particular notice just by chance, purely by chance. And he said, "I'm going there with you." And so I went together with my dad to this interview at this company called Kunsttrans. And my father was sitting next to me during the interview. It was rather embarrassing, but what could I do? And I got hired. So that's the real story, the true story. Thank you. Thank you for bringing me back to that.
No, that's the best part.
So I ended up working at Kunsttrans in Vienna, and I did all kinds of things. I started as an apprentice in the office there. But I also, when I turned 18, I got myself a truck license because I also wanted to be out in the field. I packed in museums. I drove a truck, with a courier from Rome from Vienna to Rome, and then with a courier back from Rome to Vienna. And it was kind of fun because we had a police escort through the entire country of Italy, from Rome all the way to the Austrian border, that was required by the Italian Museum. And the courier was in the truck cab with us. And the police escort, they would hand off from region to region, and they would always pull up next to the truck and look up to us and say, "Avanti, avanti," and would just tell us to go as fast as we could. So we were like flying through the entire, from Italy, from Rome, all the way to the Austrian border as fast as this truck could run. And the courier was completely terrified. So that was different times. At the time, you would follow the police, not what the courier actually wanted. So I did all kinds of things at Kunsttrans. I really learned the trade, every aspect of the trade. I mean, there was, worked in the customs office. I did coordination of museum exhibitions.
Were you doing import-export then in the customs office?
Yeah, absolutely. We had imports, exports every day, and I would have to be at 6 in the morning at our bonded warehouse where the customs clearances would take place there, and the customs officers would show up, and you would hand them a little courtesy something, first of all, coffee and a donut, and then maybe a little envelope, and just to make sure that the clearance would go through. Very different world now. This is not happening at all in Austria, but it's a long time ago. It's over 30 years ago. And at some point, after a few years of working there, I had to do my military service in Austria.
There's actually a Q&A question. People want to know if you did military service in Austria.
Yes, I did. I'm really a pacifist, and everybody who knows me well knows I really am a pacifist. And you could be a conscientious objector and do civil service instead of the military service. But back in the day, you had to actually go to a commission and prove to them that you're a pacifist. And and people always said, "Listen, you need to study up for that. You need to learn for that. You need to know all the answers in advance so that you pass this." Of course, in my youthful arrogance and the fact that I just hated school, I didn't do any of that. I just went in and said, "I can convince these people because I'm really a pacifist. I don't need to know the answers." Of course, they completely took me apart and asked me all kinds of tricks questions, and I didn't pass, so I had to go to the military. So I did my 8 months. It wasn't too bad. But after coming out of the military, I decided, hey, I went back to Kunsttrans. I was there for a while longer, but then I wanted to do some other things. And a friend of mine and I, sitting in the coffee house, he came back from Germany, and he saw, there was this really cool store in Düsseldorf where they were selling American Indian jewelry and crafts. And there's nothing like that in Vienna. We should do that. And I said, okay, let's do it. And so that was my very first venture, my very first business that I started. Yeah. And so I opened up a store in Vienna where I sold, Navajo, Hopi, Zuni silver and turquoise jewelry. We also sold Kachina dolls and pottery and moccasins. So it was, it was really, really cool stuff. And so I finally actually went on my first trips to the United States, and went to visit, went through the Southwest and went directly to the Indian reservations and to buy directly from the tribes. It was really an interesting experience. And, with my limited English, I made it through the US.
So
Back.
how long were you at Kunsttrans then?
I was at Kunsttrans from 16 till, I would say, 21.
That's a long time for like a kid starting their first job. That's a long time.
Yeah. Well, it was a good company. It was really a great group of people, and it was interesting. It was, it was obviously, I love art. My family, my background in my youth, we always went to museums. We used to go on camping trips to Italy and visit every single room in every single church you could. As a child, I didn't really appreciate that very much, I can tell you that.
We have another question from Uwe Grass from Hausenkamp. Wants to know which year at Kunsttrans did you ever meet Falco?
Did I ever meet who?
Falco?
Falco. Well, I actually happened to meet Falco because one of my best friends in the coffee house where I used to go to ended up working for Falco's management company. And so, yes, I did meet Falco, and Falco was a big presence in Vienna at the time.
So who is Falco? Explain it to everybody else who's listening.
Well, Falco is the one Austrian pop musician who ever made it big. So it's Falco. So everybody knows the tunes. Don't make me
I thought that was somebody in the shipping industry. I had no idea.
No.
He also says, "Listen to Vienna Calling." I want to hop forward a little bit, Fritz. So you have this store that you're selling the jewelry. When does it come time? When did you make that move from Austria to the United States?
Well, I briefly I sold my store. The store was doing okay, but it wasn't doing great because the dollar at the time was really, really high, and we bought everything in US dollar from the United States. And then I opened another business together with another friend of mine where we, a real estate brokerage business. And that was kind of fun and great, but at some point, we spent all our money and didn't really think about like paying Social Security taxes or anything else. So we got a little bit in trouble with that business. And that's when I decided, you know what, I need a real change of scenery. And I had the opportunity to move to the United States. I was able to get a green card, and I had the opportunity to move to the States. And so I went back to the States, and I went on a tour with a letter of recommendation from Kunsttrans, from the owner of Kunsttrans. I went on a tour, and I interviewed with a number of companies in New York. I interviewed with David Epstein, who was still at Keating at the time. I interviewed with a number of other companies. I interviewed with two other companies in New York, Hudson Shipping and Radix Group International. Radix Group was bought, and they were both in the art business at the time. I went to Jack Lewin in Chicago. So some of you who have been around for a while will recognize some of these names.
Brian, you interviewed with Brian in LA, right?
I interviewed with Brian Cook in LA. I interviewed at Ollendorf, I believe, as well. Another company that does not exist anymore. So I did a tour through the United States, and I had a number of job offers. And especially in New York at Radix Group, that was a company, non-asset based, a freight forwarder based at JFK. And there's an office in Manhattan as well, actually. It was a pretty large company, actually. And they offered me to take the manager position for their fine art department. And I felt like, well, my English is really rather broken. I mean, my English was not very good for.
So how were you doing all these interviews with these people if your English wasn't very good?
Well, I traveled through the US a couple of times to go to the Southwest to buy the jewelry. And, from listening to pop music and watching movies, you pick it up. I guess I must have had a little bit of knack for the language, even though I didn't pass it in school. Well, so in person, it was actually okay. I could communicate. I mean, with
right.
somewhat broken English, but I could make myself understood. And, in person, it was easy to understand. But when I then got my first job, I rejected the offer from Radix because I didn't feel I was ready, language and skill-wise, to be able to be a manager for other people. And so I took another job at a small company called Hudson Shipping. It was an interesting experience for me. There was another also just freight forwarding customs brokerage company. So when I came here to the United States, I really had to relearn, the business in a way where you don't own your own asset, you don't run your own trucks. That concept didn't exist in Austria or in Europe, and still to this day is extremely unusual. But it was an interesting learning experience to see, hey, it is possible to get work professionally done when you work with subcontractors, as long as you know what you're doing.
So when this non-asset based thing, it was all new to you, but is that where you took the idea, obviously for Deedle being a non-asset based company in the US, what were the appealing qualities of that non-asset based versus the asset based for you when you set up the company to begin with?
So then, I was at Hudson Shipping for 6 months. Then I felt ready for the other job, and I switched over to Radix. They called me actually and said, "Well, are you still interested, or would you be interested now?" And within 6 months, my English, I was able to actually understand people on the phone, not just in person. So that was really the big hurdle in the beginning, picking up the phone, and not understanding a word of what people were saying to me, because that's really difficult in the beginning. And so at Radix, I was for a couple of years at Radix. I arrived in the States in '88, and then in '91 I started Dietl International. So I was at Radix for about 2.5 years, and we were pretty strong in the art, in the New York commercial art market at the time, mostly with the auction houses. And so I really got very, very good experience at the time in setting up jobs, without running your own trucks and running your own assets. So I really understood the model by the time I started to open my own business. And I felt like, obviously when you start an asset-based company, you need a huge capital investment. To open up a warehouse, to buy the trucks, to buy the tools, to hire a lot of people. And, I did not have access to that much capital at the time. And so it was clear to me that, that non-asset-based model that actually works here in the United States is the way for me to go.
Right. So you also had other support networks going on at the same time, right? So you were working for Radix, you were working for Hudson, but I want to bring somebody else into the conversation, and that's Serge Sabarsky.
Yes. So, I was working at Radix, and I was getting a little bit stir crazy, trying to figure out, well, where am I going next? What am I doing? I mean, it's like when I first moved to the States, I figured, hey, I'm going to go to New York. I'm going to stay there for a year. I'm going to learn the language finally. And then I'm going to move back and get a better job in Austria, or maybe, do whatever. I had no desire and no plan to stay here for 30 plus years. And so then, but then the job became interesting, and, I started to have friends, and I had some fun in New York. And so at Radix, I was like, okay, what am I going to do next? Am I going back to Europe, or what am I going to do? And I got an interview request. I got from, I got headhunted by Christie's actually. I was hired at Radix to replace their, at the time, manager for the Christie's account, because Christie's was unhappy with that particular person. And then 2 years later, Christie started to look for a new fine art shipping manager at Christie's, and I got interviewed for that position. I did not get the job. The person who I replaced at Radix actually got that job, which was kind of an interesting. Yes, exactly. So I didn't get the job, and I to this day. And then I had another interview actually with Crozier Fine Arts, which is now Iron Mountain. Or owned by Iron Mountain. And I didn't get that job either because Bob Crozier's partner at the time, didn't agree to the deal that I had worked out with Bob. So I was really very close with both those jobs. And to this day, I always say that there were like two really, really lucky days in my life that I know of. Those are the 2 days I didn't get those jobs.
Right.
Because I was interviewed at Christie's like 3 times, and like I thought, I have this job, I got this, I'm gonna do
Because
this.
they would have changed your path so dramatically.
It would have. I would be in a different world right now.
Right.
And so I always say, hey, I'm the 2 luckiest day in my life, other than the day I met my wife, which is the luckiest day of my life. The other 2 luckiest days in my life, professionally, the 2 luckiest days in my life are those 2 days when I didn't get those jobs.
Did your parents support you coming to the United States?
No.
They did.
I mean, no. I mean,
Did they think it wasn't? Did they think you were just doing it on a whim?
They supported they supported me coming to the States, but you know, I was rather wild in my youth, and I was on my own. I mean,
it's so hard to imagine.
At 16 years, I moved out of my house. You know, I had my own apartment, and I started to work, and you know, I went on vacations to Sri Lanka and you know, all over the world, and you know, with my hippie friends at the time, and so you know, my parents, I mean, like they supported me. You know, I mean, financially, they didn't support me. I came here with $2,000 in my pocket and a suitcase, and that was it.
English, yeah, trying to figure out how to survive. Yeah,
trying to figure out how to survive. I got myself a little rental apartment in Astoria, Queens. Bought myself a kitchen table, you know, for $50, and a chair, and a futon that was on the floor, and the television set. Even though I wasn't much into watching television, but first of all, it helped me learning the language again, and second of all, I didn't have money to go out, because my very first job at Hudson Shipping, I made $22,000 a year. So, and even though that's 30 plus years ago, in 1988, even in 1988, that did not carry you very far in New York City. So
you got turned down by those 2 jobs, by Christie's, yes, and by Crozier, and then Serge comes into the picture a little bit, right? So explain. So who he is.
Yes, of course. So while I was at Radix, I started to work with a client, Serge Zabarsky, and he had a gallery on the Upper East Side in New York, Serge Zabarsky Gallery. And he was an Austrian immigrant, so we had some, you know, some common background there. And he was a really, really interesting character, and an incredibly entertaining person who always, like, you know, you would never be bored with him, because he had stories. He was the most amazing storyteller that you can imagine. And stories going all the way back to pre-war Austria, and working as a clown in a circus, and circus entertainer, and working in the cabaret, and doing all kinds of odd jobs, then having to flee Austria, first to France, then to New York, then going back as a GI in the war. Then he worked as
your father's age, or how old was he?
He was, yeah, he was about my father's age, actually.
Yeah.
And maybe a few years older. Yeah, probably just rough about my father's age, maybe a few years older, not much older. Anyway, he took a liking to me. We got along really well, and I handled his shipments all the time. And he organized a lot of museum exhibitions out of his own personal collection. He was dealing with Austrian and German expressionist art, and had amassed an incredibly important collection of his work, next to only one other collection in Austria. And which is now the Leopold Museum. And his dream was always to create his own museum. So he actually founded, together with Ronald Lauder, he founded the Neue Galerie in New York. Anyway, to make the story short, I mean, I you know, met him often. I often drove him to or from the airport when he went on his trips to open his museum exhibitions around the world.
The chauffeur.
I acted a little bit as a chauffeur. When he arrived at JFK, my office was at JFK. I knew when he would arrive, I would pick him up and drive him back into the city. And we got to go out to dinner once in a while, and I handled all his shipments, and he was pleased with the way I took care of his shipments and of his needs, and I could actually understand what he really wanted. And so one day, you know, he asked me, like, why don't you do this yourself? And I'm like, well, you know, if I had the money, I probably would do it myself. And I said, well, talk to me. I let it go. Then I interviewed with Christie's. Then I interviewed with Crozier. I didn't get those jobs. So I figured it can't hurt. Let me go back to Serge and let me ask him if he was serious. So I went to him. I said, hey, Serge, were you serious about this? He said, yeah, give me a business plan. I said, okay. So I called my brother in Vienna who went to business school and said, Walter, I need a business plan. I don't know how to do it. So my brother Walter was very kind. He helped me put together a business plan based on the accumulated knowledge of what I had learned in those 3 years I was already in the country, or less than 3 years at the time. I went back to Serge. I said, here's my business plan.
So how much money did you ask for to begin with from Serge to start the business?
Yeah, he didn't even look at it.
He didn't.
He just said, he said, all right, how much money do you need? That was the only question that he had. I said, well, you can read it. I think I'll need up to $300,000 to get the business off the ground, and based as a non-asset-based business. And so to hire one person, rent an office, get the equipment, and finance some cash flow. And he said, okay, open up a bank account. I'll put some money in. So I went to the bank. I opened up a business account. I created a corporation. I couldn't figure out what I should name it. And, Serge finally said, well, I have to search the Barsky Gallery. Your business should just be called Deedle. It's your name. So I was like, okay, let's call it Dietl International.
So how much money did he give you? What did he put in the bank account then?
So he put in $30,000 to start with. With that, I was able to rent an office, buy an IBM typewriter, electric typewriter. So that is my point. When somebody comes back to you, comes to all of you now, says, we are a technology-enabled virtual shipping company. Beware. I was technology-enabled 30 plus years ago. I had my electric typewriter. And so he gave me $30,000. I rented an office at JFK, small little office, hired one person, got myself a computer just for accounting at the time. There was no such thing as email back in the day. I just, for the younger ones of you, email is a rather recent phenomenon. Like when I started working in the industry, we were using telex machines. You probably have never even heard about it. And I opened up the doors and knocked on some clients' doors and said, hey, I'm in business. Can I do something for you? And so I started with $30,000. I think 6 weeks later, I said, I need more money because I had to pay suppliers, and with my first few jobs,
right,
there wasn't enough money coming in yet. And he gave me another $30,000 that carried me towards the end of the year, and I never needed more money. I started the business with $60,000 in the bank. And
you were good to go.
And I was good to go.
So that first office at JFK, we've talked about this before, so I know a little bit about this, but you started with a really small team of people. And we don't have to go through all of the individuals that started in there, but how many people did you start with at that office to begin with? How many people were there?
I started with one person who I hired from an art packing and handling company.
Yeah.
And then in spring, that was in the fall of 1991, we really opened the doors sort of in September, late September of 91. In spring of 92, I hired bookkeeper accountant, Diane Hill. I have to give it a shout out.
You have to do that. She's still here.
She's still backing me, having my back, and always looking out for me, and always making sure that things are done on the straight and narrow. She's the most amazing person, and I owe her a lot. And then I think in the fall of '92, we hired our next person. And so the business really started to grow rather quickly. So we did quite well very quickly.
And you had to move offices fairly quickly too, right? Because even the office
had to, when I hired the third person, we had to move the office. I mean, thank God that in the building where I rented the first office, there were other office spaces available. And so actually we moved in that same building over the first, whatever, 15 years of the existence of the company. We moved in that same building, I think 4 times.
Is that right?
Always into a larger space. So we never had to change anything because we were always in the same building. I never had to change the address. And in that building, nobody cared. So I always took my door number with me whichever door I went. So even that stayed the same.
Oh, that's hilarious.
So I never had to change anything.
So one of the reasons I want to talk about that growth and why that growth took place, but one of those, and also sort of the Deedle mentality. And we talk about this internally a lot about how it's like a family. Like I said earlier, I've been here 14 years. Many of the other people on our staff and the other managers and some of these other employees have been here many, many years, 20 plus years, in fact, for a lot of people. What did you see as a need? Why did Deedle start getting that business? Why was there a need for us to exist at that time?
Well, that's a very simple answer. Because there is no need for us to exist. And you have heard that many times.
Yeah.
And everybody on our team hears it all the time. Because the truth is, nobody needs us.
Yeah.
And back then, that was much more true than it is now, because life has become exponentially more complicated than it has been back in the past. And I can tell you a little example of what has become more complicated. So I opened up this little office at JFK, and I call up Lufthansa and says, "Hello, my name is Fritz Dietl, company is Dietl International. I'm a freight forwarder. I want to use you. Can I pick up some air bills?" I said, "Yeah, come over. Go to the export office. We'll give you a stack of air bills." So I go over to Lufthansa, I get a stack of air bills, and that's it.
And then you use your IBM typewriter to start typing.
And you type air bills and you deliver shipments to the airport, and that's it. There was no such thing as a TSA, anything like that. I mean, like anybody could just do it. So it was really amazing.
So if there's no reason for us to exist, why do we exist?
Why do we exist? And that's the $1 million question, I guess, or the 5-cent question, however you want to put it. That is what I always say to everybody on our team. Never forget, nobody needs us. There's a million companies out there who can do what we do, because what do we offer our clients?
Right.
What do we have? If I don't run my own truck, if I am not in your house taking this painting, or in your museum personally taking this painting off the wall, why do you even call me? And so that is, I think, and I think that is really key, and that's also the key to our success. And now I'm putting it out into the world so everybody can copy it, but there is really no secret to it. Every single transaction that we do, every single time we handle something for one of our clients, we need to bring value. We need to bring added value to the transaction. Yeah. We have to make it easy. We have to make sense. We have to apply our knowledge. We have to be smart about it. We have to find the right solutions. And we have to give our clients a reason to call us back every single time. Yeah. Every single job has to run that way, with absolutely zero exceptions. Because the reality is, nobody needs us. So nobody needed Dietl International back then. But in 1991, there was a bit of a down market in the market. And Masterpiece existed at the time already. They started a year or two before I opened my business. And Masterpiece at the time, had complete control over the museum market. So, but on the commercial side of the market, there were some openings.
Yeah. Right.
And the thing is, I think from the very get-go, I realized, we have to say yes. We have to say yes, we can do this, and we have to. And so it really comes down to that. I mean, I think it's really comes down to 2 or 3 things. Number one, if a client calls, can you do it? Yes, we can do it. I mean, unless it's something that's illegal or really completely out of this world, impossible. We have to make it work every single time. We have to find a solution. That's why you're calling me, because I have a solution. That's it. Number one. Number two is we have to be able to say thank you.
Yeah.
Because every single time a client calls me, I'm thankful. Because I don't expect that call. It's every single call to this day is a surprise to me. And I'm happy about it. So I'm thanking you for calling me. And the third part is once in a while, shit goes wrong.
Yeah.
And when you're working the way we are working as a non-asset-based freight forwarder, as somebody who makes arrangements for our clients, that may not always be, whatever goes wrong may not always be under our control. Whatever, trucks break down, or a subcontractor, sends a terrible team into one of my clients and they make fools of themselves, or, so that's why we have to carefully choose the people that we're working with, which what we do. But, whatever, customs goes on strike, whatever, things can go wrong. When things go wrong, I can't just point fingers in all different directions because you hired me to get something done. I have to be responsible for it. So if shit goes wrong, I need to be able, no matter what went wrong, I need to be able to also say, I'm sorry, something went wrong, and this is what we're gonna do to fix it. And I think
answer for the fix.
So it's those three things. Yes, you can do it. Thank you for hiring us. And if something goes wrong, this is what we're gonna do to fix it.
We had a truck breakdown recently, not recently, like within the last 2 years. And I called you and we had a conversation about it quickly and we just made a decision, but truck broke down in the middle of the desert in Utah. I flew to Vegas, rented a car, drove to the middle of the desert, cross-loaded the 2 trucks at 1 a.m. at night, transferred it over so it got to the museum on time, safe and secure, but we were on site to make sure that it happened in the right way. And then we didn't charge the client for it because it was a truck breaking down and we knew we had to fix the problem to make sure that they got what they needed in time. And I think that's one of the reasons I've been with Deedle for as long as I have, is because when opportunities or things like that take place, we always fix the problem and do it in the way that makes me feel good about the way that I'm treating clients at the same time too.
You don't think, you just do. When it comes to it, I mean, of course, with the client involved, I mean, the client was fully aware that the truck had broken down. The client was fully aware that we were sending somebody on site to supervise the cross-loading to make sure that it's done safely and appropriately. And, the client in the end was happy. There are different ways of handling things, but I think, the success of what we're doing, I think it comes down to those things. It's not that complicated. And so when I started the business, there was no reason for my business to exist because there were plenty of companies existing, very established companies in the market who could do what I was doing or could do it better or had their own trucks and their own assets, et cetera, et cetera. But what they didn't have was the commitment to the client and the, being humble and on the ground and appreciating the business. So, and, that's something that I hope, my company and my team, that's the spirit that we always have to keep. We can never lose because that is what makes us. So.
I want to go back. I mentioned briefly the art fairs, and we talked about how things are different now, but I want to talk, we have about 20 minutes left, Fritz. So how, at the time, art fairs, there were 3 big ones, right? Art Cologne, Art Chicago, and Art Basel were the 3 big fairs that existed back then when you started the JFK office. How were they different then, and how did you approach those fairs differently?
Well, first of all, art fairs, were very different events back in the day because they were really much more at the time still trade fairs and a lot less client-centric and not this big social, glamorous events that there are now. I mean, it's like, to a large degree at these fairs, art dealers would actually deal and trade with each other. Much more so than with the public, and they would try to bring museums in to sell some of their stuff to museums. So it wasn't that glamorous scene that it is now, but it started to become that. I mean, it was starting. It was the very beginning of that. And back in the day, I mean, a gallery went to an art fair in another city somewhere else. I mean, they would just use a local shipping company and and get local help to set up the booth. And they were much smaller affairs, much less complicated, and a lot less frantic than they are now. But after handling a couple of outfare shipments, I realized my clients are not really getting the service on the other end there that they're used to from getting from me on my end. And clients were complaining about it. They were complaining about the choice of agent. They were complaining about this. They were complaining about that. And so very early on, I made the decision, you know what, I got to go and see that for myself. So I traveled with my clients. I traveled to an outfare, and I started coordinating things on the ground for my clients. And I was basically the go-between between the agent and my client. And I ended up unpacking and installing work and helping my clients because, the help didn't show up, or the art handlers didn't show up, or the art handlers were completely incompetent and didn't know how to install, some complicated, contemporary work. And I realized, hey, my clients really appreciate that. And so very quickly, I started to put together a team of freelance art technicians. One of the first ones is Derek Hilbert, who is our operations manager for Dietl International now. But back in the day, he used to be an art tech at Pace Gallery, and then just freelance art handler. So he started to come with me to these fairs, and our clients absolutely loved it, and word spread, and it started to grow from there.
It's hard to imagine that didn't exist back then.
It absolutely nobody did it. I mean, with one exception, the British trucking companies, when they went to Basel, they trucked to Basel, and then the truck crews would then stay on and actually help the British clients. I mean, so that was really the only exceptions. So I can't say it didn't exist at all. For the Basel Art Fair, it did exist. But any international shipment, I mean, the British galleries, if they came to the Chicago Art Fair, the British shippers wouldn't fly to Chicago to help the British clients. They would rely on us or some other local art shipping companies to help their clients. Now, these days, you go to these art fairs, it's completely common. And so I think that is a trend that I believe we started, where we started to send our people around the world to help our clients.
So how many, I always think these numbers are amazing, but last year, how many people did we have at Basel, Miami for techs and staff on site?
So in Miami, at the last Art Basel Miami, I think we had our technician crew, all of them freelance crew from all over the world, was 90 strong. We had 90 people on the ground, unpacking, installing, repacking, rehanging artwork over that 10-day period while it all lasts from delivery to the fair, unpacking, installing until the fair breaks down and is completely out of the building again. So we had 90 people there, and we flew them in from, it's probably not a complete list, but we flew them in from Brazil, England, Spain, Germany, Switzerland, of course, then in the United States, California, New York, Texas, all over the place, Chicago. So we put together this incredible crew of people that we all know and that we deploy all the time. It's really an amazing thing to see.
Well, and maybe this is a good opportunity then to point to our website with the Art Handler Assistance page right now too, because these people are so imperative and important to our industry. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So, when this whole, and I really don't want to talk about the crisis today, but I mean, this is one moment where we should talk about it. When we got hit by what we are hit by right now, I realized, like, hey, these guys that are so important to the art world, in museums, in galleries, at art fairs, all over the place. I mean, these are the guys that actually make it happen, that put the stuff on the wall and make sure that it actually looks good and is safe, and they're almost all of them. I mean, out of the 90 people working there were probably, 85 artists, and then maybe, or probably 90 artists, and some of them
we have 90. Right now on the site we have 90 plus artists on there.
Anyway, when this crisis hit, I realized, these are the people that really live and work without a safety net. If they fall, they fall deep and they hit the ground hard. And this is what's happening to these people right now. And so I decided, look, what can we do? Is there something that we can do to help at least a little bit? And so we created this website where we try to connect interested buyers directly with these artists to give at least some of them a little bit of a lifeline. And we hope people actually go to it and look at it and buy some stuff. And I've heard of many sales already right now. We've gotten some nice publicity for this site. And so there are sales happening, and I'm very happy about that. And I'm now trying to work on an additional program where we can put together some emergency funding where people can apply to.
And I think it's also important to note that site, the artists who are represented on that Art Handler Assistant site are not only Deedle texts, they're texts from museums and galleries around the world. It is an open site to everyone to use and to send their work in.
So,
yeah. We're coming to the end of this, Fritz. Is there, I know there are questions on everybody's minds, and we're not going to talk about the COVID stuff right now, but moving forward, and I know next week we'll hit on this a lot, how supply chain is going to change post-COVID. What, do you have something you'd like to say to everybody, or what do you see the future of Deedle moving forward, or explain whatever you like?
Well, you know, the future of Deedle, I mean, nothing is planned other than staying the course and doing what we're doing. I mean, like, you know, we'll talk about COVID next week, but right now my mission is to keep my team together, keep the team safe, keep it together, and get ready for when things are starting up again, because things will start up again. And you know, for those who don't know, we're now part of a larger group of companies as well that also includes Rocket Cargo, that does rock and roll shipping. And our colleagues on the rock and roll side, you know, it's going to be a much tougher road ahead, because rock concerts will open up a lot later than galleries and museums and the art trade. So, you know, I want to keep the team together. I want to continue, stay the course, and you know, keep this company together and grow it as it grows organically. We never had a master plan of, like, you know, being the biggest or being this or being that. Like, I have no interest in that. I've always approached this from, if there is a need, we will try to fill it. And so, you know, for example, we grew throughout the United States, mostly by, you know, employees working for us already wanting to move to a different city. And then we decided, okay, well, if you move there, you don't have to quit. Now we're just going to open an office there. And that happened a couple of times in the history of Dietl International. That's how our LA office started. That's how our San Francisco office started. That's how our Seattle office started. So that's how our Miami office started. So it was always like somebody like, hey, you know, I'm going to move I'm quitting. I'm moving somewhere. I'm like, no, you're not quitting. Now we're going to open an office. And so, you know, and so there is no master plan for the future, except, you know, trying to continue, you know, something that, you know, all of us, this team at Dietl International that we have created like a good place to be. Yeah. And I think what's so important is you know, we're spending a lot of time together as a team, as co-workers. And so the one thing that's always really absolutely key to me is when we're hiring new people. I mean, my first thing is not even so much like, what do you know? What can you do? What are you bringing to the table? I'm not even so interested in that. Really, the one thing I care the most about is, do we like you? And will you like us? Because if we got that covered, the rest,
you can train somebody to do anything.
So yeah. But the most important thing is we got to get along, because we're spending a lot of our waking hours together every single day, at least 5 days a week. And so that's what makes the team. And, you know, I think that's really key. You got to like where you're working. You got to have fun doing what you're doing, and if not, then you should be doing something else.
Well, thank you for taking the time. I always appreciate having these conversations with you. Then everybody who's listening, please, we'll send out the invites again for next week's post-COVID conversation, and then every Thursday at 1 p.m. going forward for the foreseeable future, we will continue to have these webinars. We welcome your feedback, and if there are things you want to hear about or we can do more for you to discuss, then please let us know. Shoot us an email. Right?
Yes. So next week, we're going to dig a little bit into what shipping looks like right now, what's possible now, what's going to be possible in the future, and how we think this crisis will affect what we are doing, from air freight to ocean freight to couriers on planes, etc., etc. So next week we're going to try to make this something that's actually informative and not just entertaining. I hope you had fun. Thanks for tuning in today, and I see you soon.
See you soon. Bye, guys.